Hey, before we jump into today's episode, a Patreon shout out to my newest Patreons, Robin, love you mama, and James. Thank you for always being a huge supporter of mine. I appreciate both of you more than you know. And if you want an awesome shout out and to be told how great you are on my podcast, hop on over to patreon.com/Nikki the Death Doula. Hello, and welcome to Good Grief, the podcast dedicated to demystifying and destigmatizing grief with compassion and humor. I'm Nikki. I'm an end-of-life doula and a grief coach in Columbus, Ohio. And today we are going to be talking about compound grief, also sometimes known as cumulative grief. So before we dive in, it is an absolutely beautiful day outside my office window here, which means the birds are just going nuts, which means my cat is also going nuts. So you might hear a lot of chirping in the background from both the birds and my cat. He tends to get the zoomies when the birds are a little out of hand too. So might hear him tear through and knock my microphone over. I'll edit that out. But anyway, so what is compounded grief, also known as cumulative grief? Well, the shortest way to explain it is it's when a whole lot of crap hits you all at once. One of the things I have been doing as I volunteer with hospice here locally is making bereavement calls. So I make phone calls to family members and friends of those who have passed within the last month or so and just check in on them, see how they're doing, let them know about the grief support that's available and give them some information on that, but also just kind of let them vent for a second if they would like to. And I in every list I get, at least 2 people on there will say, well, I was doing okay, but then so-and-so just died as well. So, and that's, oh man, those are the ones I end up talking to for a while, mostly because I want to, because holy crap. It's bad enough when you have a significant loss, but then another one just jumps right in with it. It's yikes, right? So you can also define it as grief overload. I've heard it called that as well. But I mean, it can be anything like losing your spouse and then losing your job and then losing your home. And sometimes, one might cause the other. Like I said, you lose your spouse, you lose some financial stability. You're taking too much time off work because you're grieving. You lose your job, it can all just kind of spiral. But it can also just be happenstance of, well, my grandmother died last week, and then my grandfather died 2 weeks after that, and then my aunt passed away, and then my dog died, and now you're living in a country music song. But, and I don't mean to make light of these. Obviously, these are traumatic experiences, but we got to have a little sense of humor now and then, right? So anybody can have compounded grief. There are certain groups that might have an increased likelihood of experiencing it, like specifically the elderly. They might be losing siblings, friends, and spouses all within a short time period, simply because of just age. As people get older, that's when they're more likely to pass away, and you might have several that happen within a short time period, even just a year or two. And not even necessarily death losses, right? Because as I say, any loss is grief, but it could be your spouse has just died and now you're deteriorated to the point that you're not supposed to drive, so your kids take your car keys away, so now you've lost your sense of freedom. Your spouse gone has cut down your Social Security and or retirement income by half, so now you have income loss as well. So there's a lot going on all at once there. Another group that tends to experience a lot of compounded grief is healthcare professionals and trauma survivors. So if you think about healthcare professionals, I had an interesting conversation with a specific organization here in Columbus. I don't want to specify who it was without their permission, but they have employees that deal with the elderly, and she had contacted me on possible grief support for the office, which is something I would love to help more with. So, but basically she was explaining, we work with a lot of elderly patients, and we might work with them for a decade sometimes, or, several years, and then we lose them, and we're not really set up to deal with that kind of grief. and they might lose two or three. That's when it becomes compounded grief. But especially if you have a job in a place like the ICU or the ER, you might experience a lot of, even if you don't know that person, somebody in front of you is still dying. I can't even begin to imagine what COVID was like for healthcare workers. We all know the strain that they went through and the repercussions we're still dealing with now because of that, because so many people got burnt out and left because there was just too much. We weren't set up for that. And then they were just loss after loss. And while they're dealing with all this at work, they might have family members that were dying from COVID. So there can just be so many different types of just unending grief, it feels like. So with compounded grief comes complications. You know, if once you've experienced a loss and you're already trying to, wouldn't it be beautiful if losses came one at a time, right? We could lose somebody or something, cope with it, learn to live with it, you know, heal in our way, and then once have a little break, and then the next loss happens and we have some time. But that's unfortunately not how it goes. Sometimes we might just have loss after loss after loss, and trying to deal with all of those at once and yet also deal with each individual grief and each loss to honor them separately. Holy cannoli, you guys. So this is when a lot of complications might come in. You might have significant losses all in a row and just say, screw it, I can't deal with all this. I'm just not going to do it. And you go into avoidance mode or distraction mode, and you decide just not to deal with your grief at all, which we all know is not the right thing to do. It will only prolong your grief and make it harder, make it last so much longer than it needs to. So we need to avoid avoidance. Avoid avoidance? Yes, we need to avoid avoidance. But that is one complication that might come up from this, just because it gets to be too much and we just don't want to deal with it. Avoidance also comes with distraction. You know, we've talked about distraction before, but there's also numbing activities like excessive alcohol consumption, binge watching television, gaming, gambling. You know, I went into that briefly with my episode recently on addiction, and it's like I said, if you need a night to just flip through TikTok videos for 2 hours and have a glass of wine, go for it, man. As long as the alcohol isn't an issue. It's when you continually do this and you never face your grief is when it becomes a problem. Another big complication, a lot of people might struggle with their faith. You know, I will absolutely admit, I still, to this day, I struggle with faith. I can't decide what I want to believe because it's so hard to accept that a deity that you believe in would allow all these things to happen to you all at once, right? It's so easy to feel that way, and you feel hurt and betrayed by your deity or your belief system. Those are some big complications. Compound grief is hard, you guys. It's bad enough to suffer one loss, but to suffer many, good Lord. So how do you process compound grief when everything is just piling on top of you all at once? How do you deal with this? Well, I would say number one overall, take your time. Don't feel like, okay, I've got all these losses, I need to get past this right now. Don't do that. You know, like I've said, you're not going to get over your grief, right? It's just going to change and you're going to learn to walk with it. But you need to take your time and just recognize that you're not going to get over these losses immediately. It's going to take a while. And try, if you can, process each grief separately. Do them individually, and that will make it so much easier too. It's easy to get overwhelmed when you have a whole lot going on at one time and a whole lot of griefs at one time. But if you can just pick a small one, you know, and small to you, one small grief to one person might be a large one to another, but you know, pick one, the one that you feel might be the easiest, and just process that, right? And then move on to the next. And find ways, I always emphasize it's good to find a way to honor somebody or something that you've lost. Find a way for each one to just kind of honor that and have its little space in your heart and in your memory. And you can do that. There's different ways to process your grief, right? I've talked about this a lot too. Some people prefer journaling. Some people are artists. They paint or sculpt or make physical art out of it. Some people need to talk. They need to talk out loud. I cannot express how much I love storytelling podcasts. And some of my favorite episodes I've listened to of some of my favorite podcasts have been folks dealing with their grief or somebody they've lost or a thing they've lost. And it's just beautiful for them to share their story. I always express that sometimes sharing your grief can not only help you, but it can help somebody else too. There might be somebody listening that has experienced their own loss, and hearing your story has really, really helped them. But, there's also go for a walk, a run, take up a kickboxing class. If your grief manifests as anger, try boxing. Get a punching bag. Don't punch holes in your walls, please. That's just going to cause more issues, because now you've got this hole to deal with, and it's a constant reminder that you were upset and your grief. And try to be more constructive with it. If you're feeling angry and you just want to lash out, so sometimes I hate running, but I'll go for a run because I've just got so much pent up aggression in me that's how I get it out, and I feel better, even if it's a half mile. Go for a quick run if you're physically able. Like I said, take up a boxing class. Do something physical with yourself to help release some of that pent up anger. Don't be scared of your emotions. I know it's kind of a shtick with me about not wanting that I have no emotions and I don't like to feel, but there's obviously a hint of truth to that too. Emotions can be big and they can be scary. And that's not just for little kids. We talk about big feelings with little kids. Adults can have big feelings too, you guys. And that's okay. But don't be scared of them. Embrace them in a way. And just find a way to sit back and recognize that this is a big feeling and it hurts and it's awful. And that's okay and it's normal. I was helping out a client once who was just really overwhelmed. And I said, this is what works for me personally. This is what I told this client as well. Sometimes when my feelings are just too big and too all at once, that there's no word, I can just say I know that I will not be able to rationally deal with that right now because I'm feeling it. So I just let myself feel it. Okay, I know how to be constructive and how not to hurt those around me, but I just let myself go. I'm going to be really angry this day, or I'm going to be really sad this day. And I can recognize that my brain is not going to rationally deal with this or anything else right now. So I just let it go, let myself feel it. And then the next day I can sit back and think, okay, I was really angry. Why was I angry? What was it about that was angering? And at that point I can sometimes see, well, there's no real need to be angry, but it's okay. It's in the past. I felt that. I've dealt with it. Nobody got hurt. But it's easier to be objective with your feelings when you're not directly feeling them. I know I read a lot about mindfulness and how to be objective and stand back and say, why am I angry right now? Sometimes you can't do that, and that's okay. Sometimes you need to wait and feel those feelings and then look at them objectively later. So, little tangent there. But don't forget self-care. It's a term that gets thrown all over the place anymore, but do things that make you feel good. If you want to get a massage or go have wine night with the girls or beer night with the guys, again, watch the alcohol. I've already talked about getting outside, journaling, reading, meditating, anything that you need to do for you, go ahead and do it. And then find a way to honor your losses. I talked about that a moment ago with, working with them one at a time, but find a way to honor each loss you've had. Is there something that might make you a ritual or some type of healing thing that might make you feel better? Like, pick one loss and maybe write them a letter. Tell them how much you miss them, what they meant to you. Or light a candle and just speak out loud to them. I do that. I do that with my cat all the time. My poor beautiful girl I lost. I will still talk to her. I sometimes sit down and just think, Yona, I miss you so much. I don't miss your constant screaming at me and cleaning up your puke all the time, but I miss you. I miss watching TV with you, things like that. Go ahead and talk out loud to that person. Let them know how much you miss them. Maybe, again, we talked about painting or sculpting or, some type of physical outlet. Even if you're terrible at it, there's no such thing as terrible art. Art is art. It's all, it's for you. Draw something, write a poem, but just find a way to honor each loss separately if you can. And with that, recognize that each loss is separate and each loss is individual. Like I said, I talk out loud to my cat who has been dead for quite some time now, but to honor my brother, I don't sit and talk out loud to him. I honor him in different ways. A lot of my hiking and backpacking trips are my way of honoring him because that was a part of his life when he was alive. And he was a big animal lover. So, taking care of my pets and caring for other animals is a way that I honor him going forward for the rest of my life. So every loss is different and every coping mechanism is going to be different. Just like some losses are going to be easier and some are going to be harder to cope with. So separate them out, deal with one at a time. Honor how you can. Okay, and as I always say, if your grief is starting to impact your daily life, don't be afraid to ask for help. If you need help, get help. There's nothing wrong with that, and there's no shame in it. And you know what? If you're one of those people that is a little ashamed of asking for help, don't tell anybody you did. There you go. Seek out a counselor, a therapist, and never tell anybody else you did. You don't have to. There's no law saying you have to disclose that you're in therapy to anybody at all, except obviously the therapist. So, yeah, don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it. All right, guys. So, we're to that point now where we need to pull from the death deck. Woo. So, I have done this for a while now. I'm on episode, as of recording this, I think I've released 30 some episodes. I might start, there's a huge deck. There's not hundreds. There's a crap ton of cards in here. I haven't counted. There's a lot. There's a chance I might read one I've read before and not notice. So if I do, apologies. But on with it. Let's shuffle this up. All right. Pick one at random. Oh my God. Oh, Lord. This is a big one. Okay. Soul searching. What happens when we die? Has your belief in death and the afterlife changed over the years? Oh, man. This is one of those questions I dislike when people ask me because it's such a personal thing that everybody has their own belief. And the thing with beliefs, especially when it comes to something as big as this, is nobody likes to be challenged in their beliefs, right? I mean, people don't like to be challenged in their beliefs in general, but something this strong, folks really do not like to have their beliefs challenged when it comes to afterlife. So I don't want to answer specifically what my beliefs are, but I will say that it has changed over the years. It has absolutely changed. And I think it will always change. I think in 5 years, I might believe something very different than I believe now. But the one overarching belief I can say that I've always had is if we were meant to know, we would know. And we don't. Period. But I think part of that, I've always said that I'm gonna give you guys a gift. The question everybody in the world always wants to know the answer to, what is the meaning of life? Guys, the meaning of life is that we're gonna die one day, and we need to make every day matter. That's what I say anyway. If we didn't have death imminent, what the heck would be the point of everything? So we don't know what's gonna happen, and I don't think it's important that we do know. In my opinion, live your life as best you can. Be kind to other people and go out of this world without one damn regret. I'm in my 40s now, and I waited, like a lot of people, waited to my midlife to do what I really wanted to do with my life. And that was work as an end-of-life doula and help work with the bereaved. And that wasn't always what I wanted. I wanted to be a Broadway star. That's why I went to school for theater. But this is what I want now, and this is what I'm doing. And damn it, I'm doing we took up backpacking, right? I'm in my 40s. I took up backpacking. Then I hiked almost the entirety of the Long Trail in Vermont. We're finishing this year, by the way. Like, I'm doing all of this now because I can and I want to, and this is it, Make your life matter. Wow, I just went on quite a tangent, but that's a big question. That is a real big question. So I will say, if I encourage you when I ask these questions to think about them over the week. If this one's too difficult, don't do it. Okay, that's a big one. That's a meaty one. So don't break yourself over that question. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in this week, and always remember, your grief is yours. Your feelings are valid, and grief doesn't always have to suck. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening today. It really helps the algorithm so more people can find me. But if you'd like to find me elsewhere, I'm at nikkithedeathdoula.com. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram at Nikki the Death Doula. Please feel free to reach out to me there. And if you'd like to support me on Patreon, you can find me at patreon.com/Nikki the Death Doula. As always, all the money I receive through my Patreon goes into a fund so that I can provide pro bono work to those who cannot afford my services. And you'll also get access to bonus content and maybe even a shout out here on the podcast. Scripts, editing, sound design, production, literally everything is done by me, myself, just me. Except for the music. The music is Cheery Monday by Kevin MacLeod, and you can find license information at filmmusic.io/standard-license. And as always, a special shout out to my best friend and husband for continuing to support me along the way.